Welcome back, Canonites. Last week was pretty exciting for most Halo fans as 343 dropped the first real teaser for Halo Infinite since E3 2019, a trailer simply titled Signal Detected. The long and short of the situation is that the Banished have been confirmed as an enemy faction in Halo Infinite, but as always there's more to dive into. So let's start by listening to the full clip, then we'll break everything down and speculate on what it could mean for Halo Infinite.
Forces occupy the ring. Within hours, it will be under our control. Humanity will burn. Their brazen defiance will be all but a memory. No more prophets. No more lies. We stand together, brothers to the end. We are his will. We are his legacy. We are the Banished.
First things first, I've seen a lot of people seem to think that Atriox is the one speaking in this clip, but we can say without a shadow of a doubt that this is not Atriox.
Run, little demon. We are his will. We are his legacy.
The voice in the trailer has a noticeably different pitch than Atriox in Halo Wars 2, and the way he talks about his will and his legacy are clear references to Atriox. We'll talk more about that later. Further, this very brute-sounding voice, I don't think anyone would disagree with that assessment, definitely doesn't sound like any Banished leader that we've heard before, so this is somebody new. Second, there's speculation that one of the cracks on this screen is moving, which has led some to believe it's a hint at the Flood returning. However, the apparent movement is an optical illusion created by the visualized audio and refractions from the cracked glass. It isn't actually moving, it just appears that way. Sorry, y'all. With those 2 points out of the way, let's break down this teaser. Starting out, we have a screen detecting some kind of signal. The screen is cracked, meaning that wherever this screen is located has seen some previous heavy action, and we can partially see the UNSC logo at one point, meaning this is a UNSC station of some kind. Maybe a ship, maybe an outpost. Personally, I'm thinking it's a UNSC outpost on Zeta Halo, but there's no way to know at this time, and it's probably ultimately irrelevant. Moving on, we get into the message from this unknown brute within the Banished, causing the screen to turn a recognizable Banished red. We get our first couple of lines.
The hour approaches. Forces occupy the ring.
Oddly, in the official transcript posted on Halo Waypoint by community manager Sketch, the second line reads, "Our forces occupy the ring." But no matter how many times I listen to the audio, I only hear "forces occupy the ring." I will say there's a bit of distortion before forces, so maybe this brute is meant to be saying "our forces," but the start of the sentence got garbled, I don't know. Anyway, he goes on to say that the ring will soon be under Banished control, and then we get into the part that really kind of bothers me.
Humanity will burn. Their brazen defiance will be all but a memory.
Wiping out humanity has never been the MO of the Banished. They want to get power, they probably want to dominate, but declaring genocide against all of humanity has never been on their agenda, and worryingly for me, makes them a little too much like the Covenant, which the Banished aren't supposed to be. Now, when I expressed this on Twitter, in admittedly a less than ideal fashion, people brought up some points to try and explain why the Banished might be doing this. One idea was revenge for what happened on the Ark. However, Atriox was never upset at humanity as a whole. He was mad at Cutter and the Spirit of Fire. Atriox isn't the kind of mad monster that would paint an entire species for the action of a few, and definitely not one to seek out petty revenge. To quote him from the comic Hunting Party in Halo Tales from Slipspace,
"I am not your enemy unless you wish me to be. I am not Tartarus or some fanatic. I am not truth, I am not regret. I am the remedy. Vengeance is petty. Vengeance has no reward."
So no, the actions of Captain Cutter on the Ark do not explain this new direction for the Banished. Further, when Atriox left for the Ark around March of 2558, the generals he left behind are noted as having worked their influence in human criminal enterprises, so we even have direct evidence of the Banished working with humans. That evidence comes from the official Spartan Field Manual, by the way, if anyone is wondering. Now, all this said, there is one way this can make sense that ties into some of the last lines the Brute says.
We are his will. We are his legacy.
Those lines carry a heavy implication that Atriox is either dead or thought to be dead. In that light, I could see a chieftain taking over and taking the Banished in a new direction. Going back to the Spartan Field Manual, it is noted that many Banished chieftains still retain a hostility towards other species. Still, that leaves the question of why this chieftain is so dead set on burning humanity away, and there are 2 points I want to address here. First, I've seen people say that perhaps the Brute simply means he wants to burn away the humans on Zeta Halo. While understandable, the chieftain says humanity, a word with a fairly specific meaning. If he had said the humans or something, we'd be having a very different discussion, but he said humanity. That doesn't leave a whole lot of room for interpretation. And further, because I've seen this discussed, if 343 simply meant the humans on Zeta Halo, they should make that clear. Anyway, second, I've seen it speculated that perhaps the Brute and even the Banished at large are under the impression that Atriox was killed by humans. That could definitely work as a motivation, but we're going to need a pretty good explanation as to why they think this. Some have speculated that the Banished that remain in the Milky Way may have been somehow keeping in touch with Atriox when he left for the Ark, hearing about the appearance of the Spirit of Fire and then assuming he was dead after the Enduring Conviction was destroyed and communication was presumably lost. Initially I thought this wouldn't work, but after reviewing some of the lore, particularly the case of the UNSC Rubicon, the possibility of communication being maintained then lost is absolutely there. The Rubicon was dispatched to the Ark in 2553, not via the portal on Earth, but with its own slipspace drive, and at a time when humanity didn't have the ability to use the portal to the Ark, and contact was maintained for over a week. How isn't exactly clear, but communication was absolutely possible. Thus, it is possible that Atriox was keeping in contact with his forces in the Milky Way, and that contact was lost when Enduring Conviction, or possibly some other ship in his fleet, was destroyed, or some other circumstance we haven't identified. Incidentally, Atriox had more ships at the Ark than we see in Halo Wars 2's campaign, and at least one other ship was destroyed. Anyway, regardless of why the Banished are suddenly going pro-genocide, at least as far as I can tell, I'm not a fan of this decision, at least for now. Part of what made the Banished so interesting was that they, or at least Atriox, didn't let old hatreds and ideologies get in the way of their goals. I'll refer you back to the comic Hunting Party if you're interested in seeing that in action. Basically, this change reduces the Banished in my eyes and makes them less interesting as a faction. I have seen some speculate that the Banished could be working for Cortana, but that would be an even bigger departure from their core ideology, and I can't imagine any reason why Cortana would want to wipe out humanity. That's not her motivation, not remotely, and you'd need a pretty big explanation yet again as to why she suddenly wants to do that. Whatever the Banished are up to, they remain independent. I'm pretty confident of that. Moving on with the teaser, we get what is probably the best part of it, the part that really sums up what the Banished are supposed to be.
No more prophets. No more lies. We stand together, brothers to the end. We are his will. We are his legacy. We are the Banished.
There's not much else to break down here. That no more prophets, no more lies bit is the Banished ideology to a T. That pretty much wraps up the teaser itself, but there's a bit more I want to touch on. First, there's been talk that if you add up the number of characters, words, and sentences in the trailer, supposedly 53 words, 278 characters, and 12 sentences, you get 343, which would be a cool reference. However, going by the official transcript on Halo Waypoint, I can only get 53 words, 12 sentences, and 265 characters, including spaces, adding up to 330, which, that's the number of Spartan 3s in Gamma Company, but I doubt that's what anybody's going for. Now, you can add punctuation, a period or something at the end of each sentence, and a comma in the second sentence to get the 278 character count, but that's all kind of arbitrary, and none of that is in the official transcript. Cool idea, but it doesn't seem to pan out. Next, I want to address some of my concerns. First, when this came out, I had what you could call a very strong reaction. For months, we'd been getting hints that the Banished were going to be in Halo Infinite, and this just confirmed it. What really worries me that, with the singular focus this brute has on humanity, it feels like the Created are going to be swept aside as a faction, or have their role reduced in favor of the Banished. I know for many of you, that's a good thing, but for me, it feels like Halo 5 and the disappearance of the Janus Key all over again. Now, we do know that Cortana is in Infinite, that's undisputed, and she seems to be a fairly central focus. But Cortana's presence doesn't guarantee the Created will be there. I know it's not a very popular faction, it's a very unpopular faction. I'm not a fan of how Halo 5 went down either. But I just want to see the story wrapped up properly, not discarded or resolved off screen or something. Yes, I'm jumping to conclusions, but it's a concern I've had for a while and I can't just ignore it. I mean, the Janus Key was written out of Halo in a damn comic. Would it be so crazy for the Created to just be defeated off screen? Again, I'm sure many of you are fine with that. I'm not. I don't want to see storylines basically aborted because of poor initial reception. I want to see them refined and resolved properly. Just because an idea isn't received well initially doesn't mean it should be thrown to the wayside. The Arbiter being a playable character in Halo 2 was incredibly controversial, incredibly derided at release, and now it's fondly remembered by much of the vocal community. And yes, Halo often deals with many factions at a time. I even make note of that in my recent video on how I felt Infinite should handle enemy factions. Still, I worry that the Banished will overshadow the Created simply because there's a fan demand and not because it necessarily makes for a better story. Further, as I said in that same video, I worry that the Banished presence may result in the conflict at the Ark being resolved off-screen rather than in a Halo Wars 3 game like it absolutely should be. I hope my fears are unfounded, but that's where I am right now. The July Xbox event is relatively soon, and we're due to see more Halo Infinite at that time. Hopefully it means more context on the game's story, with some campaign gameplay footage. I think I know where a lot of you stand, but let me know in the comments below what you feel regardless. And you know what? Assuming the July event isn't this upcoming week, let's do a pre-event Q&A. It's been a while, right? Leave any questions, Halo Infinite related or otherwise, down there in the comments with the hashtag Q&A. That's all for now. This has been Halo Canon, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing, and if you really love me, hit that notification bell and leave a thumbs up. These both really help out the channel. I wouldn't be where I am now without your views and support, so once again, thank you. Keep on being awesome, Canonites.